Welcome to the Insights to Communicate podcast with Adam Probalski, where market and opinion research come together with public affairs and PR.
Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Fadia Nordtveit. She is a professor at Springfield College in Massachusetts and Stern School of Business in New York, part of NYU, and a former nonprofit founder and a consultant today. She's a communications expert, an inclusivity expert. Doctor, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I just kind of gave a lot of background there. Obviously, you have an accomplished career, but why don't you give us a sense of how you got to where you are today? In a couple of minutes, describe your entire existence.
Sounds good, Adam. So I guess what will make this easier for the audience to relate to would be that in the different kinds of hats that I have, which I'll talk about briefly, the thread that connects it is my passion for sustainability and my passion for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So I'm a professor, a full-time professor at Springfield College and a part-time professor at NYU, Stern School of Business to be specific. And I'm a founder of a consulting company called Collaboratively that is based on my model of inclusion called the Inclusive Business Model Canvas. Through my company, I provide talks, workshops, trainings, and research to companies and organizations, towns, cities, and governments who are interested in creating a more inclusive business or foundational or city or town structure or a government structure. So it really works well for complex systems and with multiple departments and all of that. My love for sustainability is my research in environmental communication in the past, which led to me founding the nonprofit, the Be Green Project, which led to a book that I wrote out of Rutledge, Taylor, and Francis called Participatory Networks and the Environment. And I also have a media and communication hat through my different trainings and degrees, and I love the power of media and the power of, and you probably do too because you have a podcast, and I have a video podcast called Talking Out of Line, and that centrally focuses on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in multiple industries. So you can think of me as being someone that really wants to do theory and praxis, academia and industry in combining sustainability and inclusion in every sort of walk of my life. And I guess why should I leave out the last hat? I'm also a co-editor of an academic special issue journal on DEIB as well. So thank you for having me.
Fantastic. All those things are hyper relevant to experiences we're having today and our listeners are having today. We do a ton of work in local government. And so I'm super interested in that part of what you do. Take a town in Colorado, 40,000 people or 140,000 people. It's diverse. There's multiple languages spoken. There's immigrant population. There's, a lot of white people too. There's a lot of diversity. How does that town, or it could be in Kansas also, wherever it is, how does that town take on some sort of inclusive perspective? What are they supposed to do? Like, what are the top 3 things that you should do right away to be an inclusive environment and have a sense of belonging for everybody in that town?
So I'll answer this in a couple of different ways. The first way would be that no matter what your composition of your town or city, anyone can take an intersectional and inclusive lens. So what do those words mean? Intersectional means that we all are made up of more than one identity. So you and I, we may appear to be like, when people see us, what they assume to be that we are, versus things that people don't know about us, or invisible identities, as I call it.
Right.
And so we are all made up of more than one thing. And I don't think our towns, cities, governments, businesses, schools, hospitals, actually, those are just naming a few industries and few entities that we are all associated with. I don't think does a really good job of tapping into every bit of us and every part of us. So according to a person like me who's trained in this way, that's an opportunity, whether you're a business or a town or a city, and you want to be on the map and you want to, say a town in Colorado or in Kansas, whatever you're referring to, everyone wants to be on the map and be known for something. And one of the ways that I think that people can be on the map and known for something is actually taking more of an inclusive lens, because you really have more of an option on tapping into what may not be obvious to others as being an interest story, or as a way of marketing and branding your town or city to a new tourism audience or to a new development audience, whatever it is that you're looking for. So I think some of the biggest advice that I could give, whether it's a small town, medium town, big city, whatever it is I feel that our companies and organizations and towns and people who run all of these things, the leaders of our towns, need to be trained in understanding the potential, the business potential, the cultural potential, the economic potential, the educational potential our intersectional identities actually have for putting those towns and cities on the map, putting the businesses and making them thrive more, because there's just a lot of people with a lot of different identities, which often are tied to their talents, that are sitting there, that do not get on the brochures of what towns are about, the restaurants that don't get represented, the educational institutions that are doing really amazing work don't get highlighted in the local town newspaper or the local television channel. So I feel my longer answer is to show you that structurally we can all be in a better place if we tap into this idea of DEIB, because essentially we would be richer in terms of the stories and the people that make up these towns and cities.
So, what do you say to the mayor or some other policymaker or manager at a city like that that says, you know what, we don't need that? Like they're maybe not being obnoxious, not being over the top, inappropriate, but just look, there's people who live here and everybody's welcome, but we're not going to take any extra steps to do anything to recognize any one group because, like, we're all in this together, kind of a thing. How do you speak to someone like that who says, we don't need what you do?
So there's a couple of different ways of going about it, and I'm sure it depends on the mood of the consultant and the researcher also on that given day.
Yeah.
So on some given day, I would sit down with data points as to why DEIB work or work on inclusion and intersectionality is not about any one group. It's actually the opposite. When you do work on intersectional identities, you're strengthening the idea that we may be united individuals, but we can be different and united, and that's our asset. So that's one thing. So that's a huge misconception that say a mayor or a town leader or business leader may have about this whole process of DEIB, that this is specifically about one group and that it benefits one group at the expense of others. So in the very beginning, I would be dispelling that whole wrong information and understanding of what this work is really all about, which I think is a rational conversation that needs to be happening. The second is, I feel most good leaders uh, do have, whether they want to call it out or not, have the responsibility of being an inclusive leader, meaning whether their town is made up of what they consider as being a uniform audience and town members or diverse ones. I would think one of the basic things a leader needs to be is inclusive and nice and kind to others. And I think that doesn't require any kind of special training, only that we realize that humans, if we look at the data around it, we are not very good at dealing with difference.
Right.
And if we seem to do better with what is similar to us, and we seem to have a habit of wanting to make others who are different from us to try and force them and or create circumstances that they need to be like us. So I think my argument to them would be that uh, first, it's up to them. No one can change anyone's journey and life point unless they have a realization about what they feel as a priority for their town or for whatever their job is. But from my vantage point, I would sit down with my data points and show them that it could benefit them and it could benefit the town as well as the leader's professional development in with the result of DEIB as an outcome that is beneficial for the whole community, that uplifts the whole community and get rather than focusing on any one group, because I think that's a pretty big misconception about what this work is about.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, for a lot of people, it's quite discomforting to experience, be around, see people who are different. And we have to on both sides of that equation really recognize that we have people who are sometimes othered, and we want to somehow figure out how to embrace them and bring them in. And on the other side, there's people who just feel really uncomfortable with those other people around. And we've got to figure out a way to get those people comfortable with that. And some people never will, but there's probably a smart process for that. And someone like you could probably help bridge that gap. Organizational structure, organizational leadership, it's a study that's newer, I guess, maybe a couple hundred or so years old. What are the new things? What are the things organizationally you're seeing, not just in government and all kinds of institutions? What's like the emerging thing that we should all be thinking about in organizations and leadership that most people don't necessarily know about?
I would say the four topics that are very important now, that are highlights of this conversation on organizational and business leadership, and broadly defined town, cities, etc. as well, is DEI. For sure, there's a lot of polarization on diversity, equity, inclusion, and I would like to add belonging, because for me that's the goal.
Right.
And so that, I would say, is a huge point of discussion, and whether you like it or not, it's a point of discussion for the proponents and people who, in my books, do not fully understand what it is, and then they just speak out against it. And for a researcher and an educator like me, as well as a consultant, I think it's my responsibility, with all of my degrees, to actually help those who don't know it. I deal with this in the classrooms all the time in a much smaller scale. I introduce something to students, and sometimes students are like, "Oh, I don't want to learn that. I hate that." And then you deal with it and reason with it from a point of data. And then there's a lot of shifts that happen in the classroom. So I don't see why society is any different from sort of a classroom experiment.
That-
The other topic that I think is really big is obviously still sustainability and climate change. And that is a topic in leadership, and understanding how leadership can be thinking about inclusive practices as well as sustainable practices. So I think that's another point of continued conversation. As we just discussed before the recording, that there's an earthquake that just happened, and there's going to be information in New York and in the Northeast, and just today. And it's obviously connected to the issues that we are having with environmental challenges that we are facing globally. The two other topics that I see are coming up in conversation, are central to the discussion on organizational leadership, will have to be AI, artificial intelligence. And that is a very good topic in correlation with DEI and sustainability as well, because there's a lot of discussions on the ways in which AI can be benefited by having more of an emphasis on DEIB, where we really understand how we can help people of all different identities to really make sense of the lack of understanding many populations have on AI, and the impact that it can have on their lives
Right.
and their job futures, their personal futures, their professional futures. And last but not the very least, I think a very big point of discussion is overall just the role of business in society, which is, there's still a lot of people with the more Milton Friedman type of model that, oh, business is only about the bottom line, that we really just are here to make money. We don't care what happens to humans, to animals, to the world, to the environment, to DEI. We just want to maximize our profits. And then there's this shift on leadership, where how do we train leadership to not just be this model of Milton Friedman, where business is connected to a larger fabric of society, of AI, of we have consequences, we have impacts on society, on people, and equity, and all of that. So I would say those are the big topics that leaders need to equip themselves with.
That is awesome. I wasn't sure what you were going to say with all that, but that is pretty amazing, right? Now everyone listening has the curriculum they're supposed to go out and learn in each one of those categories
Sorry,
to
I had
be.
to bring my professor hat into this.
But no. As long as there's a class that's offered, we can go and learn it. That's really incredible. Very, very cool. So this might lead into your classroom. Young people today, right? In quotes, what is it that you're seeing in younger students in business school today? Are they like fully adopting this idea that we've got to kind of move on in business? And obviously have profit as a central component, but have these other parts of, as you say, the kind of the fabric of society baked into businesses? Or are they adopting that fully? Or maybe they adopting it too much and thinking that everything can be free for the world and profit, doesn't really have to be a part of any equation? Is there a good balance? What are you seeing in your classroom?
Wow, that's such an interesting question. So I would say I'm seeing a mix still, which is and of course, I as you heard from my background, I teach communication and business both, so I'm surrounded by the creative types as well as the suit types, like
Right.
the executive types. So I actually sort of straddle between two very different types of students on a daily basis. I would say that I think the millennials and Gen Z. So I identify as the oldest millennial. So I'm just turned 40, and my so I guess I'm the oldest millennial out there, and then my students are mostly like Gen Zs. And I would say millennials and Gen Zs, we are mainly more idealistic in wanting to combine the Friedman type of idea of, okay, so here's profit. We realize we need to make money, but at the same time, we can't leave behind sustainability, DEIB, and what we care about. And what people care about, I think, are different. Some people care about animal rights more than, say, organic farming versus Black Lives Matter, versus everyone has their own path of activism or interest and what gets them going. Or I would hope so, at least, that we all have some sort of trajectory and passion in life. And but what I do notice is that I'm that students who have the older idea that, hey, I'm just here to get a job, graduate, get a job. I don't really care what happens to the world around me. I feel that there's less of that, and that there's more of a, and I do notice it because I'm a professor now for 19 years. I can tell who is making stuff up and wanting to fit in. I mean, that's part of, I call it in my classrooms my superpower. Like, I can kind of smell things. And, because you kind of have to, when you're doing this work, you really need to know people because you're dealing with people all the time.
Right.
And so I think there is less of a. I think it's changing to where I see more younger generations feeling more ashamed about having that kind of a narrative, and even if I feel like they don't quite have their social justice angle very well developed, they try to pretend like they do care about some things, because the basic narrative, I think, has overall shifted, that yes, we need jobs, but we need to care beyond just our immediate needs of paying our bills and whatever is the practical outcome that we're looking for. And I think that's a positive shift.
I'm not so sure it's a bad thing if people adopt good behaviors or good strategies, even if they don't truly believe in the reason behind them. And obviously, I think you want everyone to be genuine in their intentions. But if people absolutely think it's ridiculous and unnecessary to conserve water in a place where there's a drought, but they adopt it anyway because of peer pressure, I don't think that's a bad thing. It's okay.
I fully agree with you. And in fact, my next book that is coming up the end of this year, called Millennials Gen Z, I'm actually writing a book about this.
Oh,
Millennials Gen Z and the Fair Trade Revolution in the United States. It's exactly, I'm referring to that in a chapter and I'm actually calling it woke washing,
right,
which is, some people are trying to be woke because they're pressured into it,
right.
and they don't fully understand, or they couldn't care less. But it's exactly what you said. I don't need to repeat it. It's that some of us just don't really understand, but we feel ashamed to be something else,
Sure.
to fit in. And or we feel self-conscious, whatever, we want to fit in, we want to be like our friends, or whatever is we think is cool at that moment, that is instagrammable, or whatever is the wrong reason that leads us to the right direction. I'm okay with it. But of course, I truly believe in, I'm one of those people that kind of believe in being more clear about, and being more intentional about uh, be about my life and anyone else's, for that matter. So I would hope that over time, as you are faking it till you're making it, that one day you really do get it, that why is this something that I rationally need to choose to do. And that's where I guess my data background comes in. That when you ask the question about what would you do when a mayor tells you that this isn't important, I'll be like, well, I'll sit down with them and talk rationally with data. And if then they don't get it, then they don't get it. That's not their
Right.
journey. It's not. I'm not going to impose it on them. That's their path. That's their journey. That's their understanding of leadership.
Right. Okay, so we've got a lot of background, a lot of information, a lot of insight. Maybe dial back a little bit to, you might have been 12, you might have been 24, you had a mentor, you had someone in your life that really impacted you and drove you to where you are. And maybe it was for good reasons or bad reasons. Who's that one person in your life that like you give credit to for some of your success or kind of guiding you in the right direction?
I would have to say, without any doubts, my dad. So my father is the foundation of everything that I am today, because essentially what he did was he unguided me rather than guided me, meaning that he usually a lot of women, especially uh, originally I'm from Bangladesh, and a lot of people from I'm Bangladeshi American. A lot of people's understanding of Asian cultures and parenting is that parents are trying to pressure you into sort of whatever their vision is of what your life should be. I think my father trusted me from a very young age and allowed me to experiment with my interests, and that was the best guidance I could have received. Is that he was there for me, and what he didn't do was he basically put in a message that I want you to do. I see that you're smart and interested in the world, and I want you to just continue doing the best that you can in whatever you choose to do. So that didn't feel like pressure to me. That felt like real good trust and sort of encouragement to really just prosper in the ways that I want to prosper without him telling me my formula of success. So yeah, I thought that was I mean, that's super easy for me. Like, I don't think I could have had a better role model that was than my father in believing in me. So I think that is for sure the person I have to identify.
I think that's a sign of a great parent, the ones that can identify when to give a very long leash or a very long, tail of support, system, but go out and venture versus, here's your path. I think that's an amazing parenting technique. I was definitely benefited from that with my parents, and I hope I'm giving that to my kids as well. All right, so tech stack. You wake up in the morning, there's kind of two kinds of people in this world. They wake up, they grab their phone and look at three different apps or three different news sources, or the other people like go and meditate in their meditation room. Like, I don't understand those people, but like I support them. Like, which one are you? What do you do when you wake up in the morning?
Oh, what I do when I wake up in the morning is oh my God, do you really want to know? So, what I do is I make food for my kids, and I pack their lunch and their breakfasts before I get ready. And I try to wake up, I don't try to, I always wake up earlier than my husband, my family members, so that I can have that moment of peace and organization when their food and everything is packed. So, for me, that's really important as a parent, because that's also part of my responsibility in the world. I've chosen to be a parent. So nutrition is very important to me. I'm a working parent. So I for me, putting their food together and putting their breakfasts on the table before I can go and get ready for my work is my meditation, and is sort of what keeps me at peace throughout the day. So yes.
Very nice. And you're in communication. So what are your like news sources? What do you have to see in the morning or before you go into the office?
So I have a very interesting relationship with news. This will be interesting for your audiences. We probably don't hear this very often. I really feel my passion for media and communications is because I did not get addicted to news. Because news is told. I would love the audience to look up this very famous British Jamaican scholar called Stuart Hall. He's a leader in media and communication. I mean, if you Google Stuart Hall Cultural Studies UK, there's going to be endless things about him on the internet.
Yeah.
I follow the paradigm of Stuart Hall, where I feel that news is so framed and so created by male for male audiences. And I feel very strongly that we need to be cautious about the kind of news that we put in to our heads, because um, Of course, we need to know what's going on in the world, but my alternative ways of dealing with news is to read more meaningful research about it. And of course, I stay up to date that here's a war going on there, here is a, earthquake happening over there. But
Yeah,
I do feel, having been part of the field of media and communications for as long as I have, that a lot of news is made by men for men. And I think that there is a lot of discouragement and negative framing for women. And I feel one of the reasons why I'm a successful woman and an emerging strong voice is because I didn't read too much into the negative paradigms of what it means to be a woman in news ecosystems. And so that it is a very complicated answer. It's not the usual answer you hear.
right.
But I'm not a big proponent on being addicted to news. I don't think it's good for us. That's how I feel about it.
I agree. And unfortunately, it took me 50 years to figure that out. And so I've, in the last couple of years, I've decided not to watch news because it really isn't. It isn't information. It's commentary. Like because information is free and commentary is what they're delivering these days, and that's less fun for people who think for themselves. Uh, and so,
Also,
uh,
they're trying to spin you a story in their way. It's not
yeah,
data. And if you're
yeah,
educated enough and you know how to, if you know how to find data that is good data and reliable data,
right.
you don't need to, like, you hear other people's spins and commentaries. You can. That plays a role in knowing what is Fox News saying about this, what is New York Times saying about that. But that's ultimately somebody's spin and someone's frame. So I feel with all the education I have, I at least have the ability to sift through data myself without having commentary hit at me from different directions.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Something I'm seeing that maybe other people have seen for a long time, but if you look at certain social media, certainly YouTube, other sources where people gather, there's this newer trend, I call them news tellers. These people who are that you have to kind of be discerning in who you want to watch and listen to and follow, but they are generally kind of subject matter experts or people who have some relevant experience, military and conflict, things like that, diplomatic. And some of them are fairly, unbiased. You can kind of get their sense of their perspective, right? This one's a Western perspective. This is a perspective from some other source, some other way. And I really find them super interesting because they are really almost overtly doing, working to not be biased and to give you kind of the perspective of the information and pull in from different sources. I feel like there's a ton of that out there, and we're really benefited by it if you can be discerning. And so you don't have to go to traditional news sources. You can go to these people who kind of break it down. Have you seen that as a trend? Is that something you see as an interesting component of the future?
Absolutely. And I actually wanted to put out a website. It's called theconversation.com.
Yeah.
I would suggest the audience and you to check that out if you don't know that already. I use it in my classrooms for journalism, communication, business all the time. They're a data backed journalistic platform that really, really, their whole thing is a response to biased journalism. And they, really, it's one of the most fantastic resources of news that has data as its foundations. The conversation.com, I would ask everyone to check out. It's essentially a written version of what you were describing. So
Very
highly recommend that source for just going through resources of news.
awesome. All right. To wrap, words to live by. What's that mantra that runs through your head that motivates you that you think everybody else should know?
F- have a passion, be intentional about what you want to do with your life. Life feels and turns out differently when you put intention and thought into it. And of course, be mindful and mindful of others. Don't get hung up on being a good person or a kind person, because remember, kind and good is very subjective. What's good to you may be bad to not good to others, and what is kind to you may be unkind to others. So rather be mindful and be asking others on, when you're being a relational human being, which we all are, we all have to have relationships with people. Talk to people, don't assume, and just you know figure out what good means between you and them.
I love it. Awesome words to live by. Thank you very, very much. Thanks for joining. We appreciate it. I hope to keep the conversation going.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This has been Insights to Communicate with Adam Probalski, president of the woman and Latina-owned market and opinion research firm, Probalski Research.